The afternoon was wrapped in a curtain of constant rain, and the sound of raindrops mingled with the incessant buzz of New York City. Thomas Aldridge, a man whose fortune in the tech world couldn't shield him from the pressures of everyday life, found himself walking through the wet streets, trying to clear his mind of work-related burdens. Dressed in a dark overcoat and a hat that did little to keep the cold rain from hitting his face, he passed by people hurrying to escape the weather. In this city that never sleeps, the rain was just another fleeting obstacle. But for Thomas, that day seemed to invite deeper reflections. His walk led him to one of the less fortunate areas of the city. There, under the forgotten structure of an old warehouse, he noticed a small group, easily ignored by hurried passers-by. It was a young woman with two small children, huddled under a torn piece of tarp that barely protected them from the relentless rain. Thomas hesitated, the scene before him piercing the barrier of his usual indifference. With reluctant but determined steps, he approached the trio. The woman looked up, her eyes reflecting a mix of surprise and caution. "Sorry to bother you," Thomas began, crouching down to meet her gaze, "but it seems like you could use some help." Eliza, holding her youngest tightly in her arms while the older one clung to her skirt, forced a fragile smile. "We're okay, sir," she said, her voice almost drowned out by the sound of the rain. "Just trying to stay dry. This will soon pass." Thomas observed the torn tarp and the few wet belongings they had. "My name is Thomas," he continued, extending his hand, which she hesitated before accepting. "And you are?" "Eliza," she replied, glancing at her children, who watched her with cautious curiosity. "These are my children, Matt and Lucy." "Eliza, I'd like to help if you'll let me," Thomas said, feeling a wave of compassion he hadn't expected. "I have a house not far from here that's vacant. It's fully furnished and more secure than this place. And of course, if you're willing, I'd like to help you find a fresh start for you and your children." Eliza looked at him, uncertainty and hope dancing in her eyes. "Why would someone like you help people like us?" she asked, suspicion marking her words. Thomas smiled, a soft and genuine gesture. "Because we all need help sometimes. And today, I found you." The rain continued to fall, but for a moment, under that small shelter, the barriers between a millionaire and a woman struggling to survive seemed less insurmountable. They talked a bit more, Thomas listening attentively as Eliza shared her story of abandonment and struggle. As the afternoon gave way to dusk, Thomas knew this encounter wasn't something he could simply leave behind. He offered Eliza his card. "Think about my offer. I'll be back tomorrow, and if you're willing, I can take you there." Eliza looked at her children, then at the man offering not just shelter but a possible new life. She nodded, cautiously optimistic. "Thank you, Thomas. We'll think about it." With that, Thomas said goodbye, his heart inexplicably lighter. He knew the next day could be the start of something new, not just for Eliza and her children, but perhaps for himself as well. The next morning, as the sun struggled to break through the gray clouds remaining from the previous afternoon's rain, Thomas Aldridge returned to the spot where he had found Eliza and her children. Determination and concern marked his face as he walked through the damp streets of New York, carrying a briefcase filled with documents and a proposal that could change the life of a small family. As he approached the makeshift shelter, he noticed that Eliza was already awake, cradling her youngest in her arms while the older one played with a small plastic car beside her. She looked up when she heard Thomas's footsteps, and a slight smile formed on her face as she recognized him. "Good morning, Eliza. I hope you had a peaceful night," said Thomas, trying to convey as much warmth as possible through his tone. "Good morning, Thomas," Eliza replied, clearly surprised to see him so early. We managed to get by, thank you." Thomas nodded, placing his briefcase on the ground beside him and crouching to meet Eliza's gaze. "I've thought a lot about our conversation yesterday," he began, looking directly at her. "And I really want to help you more concretely." Eliza watched him cautiously, still unsure about the sincerity of Thomas's intentions. "You mentioned a house," she recalled, her voice mixing hope with a hint of distrust. "Yes, exactly." Thomas opened the briefcase and took out some photos. He handed them to Eliza. "This is the house. It's in a quiet neighborhood, just a few miles from here. It's vacant right now and would be perfect for you." The photos showed a modest but cozy brick house with a small garden in front and a white picket fence. Eliza took the photos, running her fingers lightly over them, as if trying to absorb the reality they represented. "And that's not all," Thomas continued, pulling a thick envelope from the briefcase. "I'd also like to offer you a fund to help you start over. There's enough money here for you to take care of your immediate needs, enroll your children in school, and maybe even start a small business if that's something you wish to do." Eliza looked at the envelope with an expression of disbelief and relief. She raised her eyes to Thomas, searching for an explanation for such generosity. "Why are you doing this for us?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. Thomas shrugged, a simple gesture that hid the depth of his own search for purpose. "Sometimes, life gives us more than we need," he said softly. "Helping others. Maybe it's a way to balance things out. I believe everyone deserves a second chance, Eliza. And I see a strength in you, a desire to do better for your children. That's something worth supporting." Tears glistened in Eliza's eyes as she held the envelope and photos against her chest. I don't know how to thank you," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. "You don't need to thank me," Thomas replied, standing up. "Just do the best you can with what you're given. That's all I ask." Eliza nodded, a decision forming in her heart. "We accept your help, Thomas. And I promise to do everything I can to make this change our lives for the better." With that promise, a new chapter began for Eliza and her children, one full of possibilities and hope. As Thomas said goodbye and walked away, Eliza looked at the photos of the house once more, imagining a future that, until then, seemed only a distant dream. Eliza, holding each of her children's hands, crossed the threshold of the new house with a mix of nervousness and palpable excitement. The day was clear and fresh. A gentle breeze swayed the curtains of the open windows, inviting the new family to enter. The house, depicted in the photos Thomas had shown, was even more charming in person. It was spacious, with walls painted a soft shade of cream and hardwood floors that echoed with each cautious step of Eliza and her children, Matt and Lucy. "Look, Mom, I have my own room!" exclaimed Lucy, running to one of the open doors that revealed a small bedroom with pale blue walls. Matt, a bit more reserved but visibly impressed, went to the living room window and looked outside, observing the small garden in front of the house. "And we have a garden too," he said, a smile slowly forming on his face. Eliza watched her children with a heart full of gratitude. After months of uncertainty and restless nights, that moment brought deep relief. She walked to the kitchen, where boxes were already stacked, courtesy of Thomas, who had arranged everything to ease their move. Each box was carefully labeled, "Kitchen, Clothes, Toys." Opening one of the boxes, Eliza found new pots and dishes, still with tags. Thomas had truly thought of everything. She felt a wave of emotion realizing how transformative this change would be. In the following days, Eliza worked hard to turn the house into a home. Pictures were hung, curtains, chosen by her and the children, were placed, and every little detail was a celebration of the new life they were beginning there. With the house organized, Eliza turned her attention to the thick envelope Thomas had given her, full of money. She knew that part of this resource needed to be invested wisely. Matt and Lucy's education was her priority. She enrolled them in a nearby school known for its welcoming environment and excellent curriculum. With the children's education secured, Eliza began to think about a small business. During the days of struggle, she had become skilled at making cakes and sweets to sell in the neighborhood where they previously lived. Now, with an adequate kitchen and resources, she decided to turn this skill into a stable source of income. She visited the local city hall to obtain information about necessary licenses and talked to some suppliers. Thomas had mentioned he could help with the business aspect initially, so she planned to discuss this with him soon. The idea of a small bakery started to take shape in her mind, a place that could be a cozy gathering point for the community. While Eliza planned her future business, evening gently arrived. The children, already settled and happy in their new rooms, slept peacefully, and Eliza allowed herself a moment of rest, looking out the kitchen window at the garden now illuminated by moonlight. It was a new beginning, full of promises and possibilities. But as Eliza mapped out plans for a brighter future, she was unaware that Roger, Thomas's former colleague, was beginning to plot against this new happiness. Driven by envy and suspicion, he watched from afar, planning how he could prove his suspicions about Eliza were correct. The autumn sunlight cast a golden glow over the bustling avenues of New York, where Roger Stills, with his leather briefcase full of documents and a stern expression, hurried toward his office in the city center. An insurance investigator by profession and a skeptic by nature, Roger always had a keen eye for inconsistencies and fraud. But that day, his thoughts were focused on something beyond his usual work. Roger and Thomas Aldrich had been college classmates, and although their careers had taken different paths, Roger had always closely followed Thomas's meteoric success. While he admired the fortune and influence Thomas had amassed, a part of Roger couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy and resentment. When he learned through mutual contacts about Thomas's sudden generosity toward an unknown woman and her family, something inside him stirred. Arriving at his office, Roger closed the door with a determined click and sat at his desk, spreading out the photos and information he had gathered about Eliza. Why would Thomas do something like this? What's his interest in helping a woman he barely knows? He murmured to himself as he examined the documents. The idea that Thomas was simply being generous was something Roger couldn't accept. There had to be, in his mind, something more, something hidden. Determined to uncover what he considered to be a sham, Roger began to plan a discreet approach. He decided to start by checking Eliza's past. If there's any dirt beneath all this, I'll find it, he promised himself. With his contacts in the insurance industry and a natural talent for investigation, Roger initiated a detailed search into Eliza's history before her encounter with Thomas. In the following days, Roger divided his time between his regular duties and his personal investigation. He contacted Eliza's former landlords and neighbors, subtly suggesting during conversations to uncover any flaws in her character. Was she always a good tenant? Did she always take good care of her kids? Never got into trouble? He asked, his voice carrying a feigned curiosity that masked his true intentions. In one of these meetings, Roger spoke with a former neighbor of Eliza who seemed to hesitate before responding. Well, she always seemed like a good mother to me, but you know how it is, right? Appearances can be deceiving, the woman said, fueling Roger's suspicions. Encouraged by this small indication that something might be amiss, Roger began compiling a report with his findings, although there was still nothing concrete. He knew he needed more, something definitive to shake Thomas's confidence in Eliza. It was then that Roger had an idea that could give the necessary weight to his suspicions. He decided to discreetly spread rumors about Eliza in the social circles he shared with Thomas. If he could create doubts in the community, maybe he could pressure Thomas to reconsider his decision. With a plan in mind, Roger started attending events and gatherings, sowing doubts with casual comments. Have you heard about Thomas's new protege? A touching story, sure, but there are always two sides to every story, don't you think? He would say, carefully observing people's reactions. While Roger believed he was getting closer to his goal, Eliza continued to work on her small business, unaware of the schemes forming in the shadows. She spent her days between the bakery and the house, focused on building a new life for her children, not knowing that the challenges she would soon face might come from an unexpected source. Spring brought with it a renewal of life all around, with flowers blooming and the days lengthening. But for Eliza, the season also brought clouds of suspicion and unexpected difficulties. Since she started attending local events to promote her new bakery, she had noticed whispers and sideways glances, a palpable change in how some people in the community treated her. One morning, while setting up her stand at the farmer's market, a place where she sold her homemade cakes and pastries, Eliza was approached by Marianne, a regular customer who seemed hesitant to speak. "Eliza, I just wanted to say that your cakes are wonderful, but I've heard rumors about how you came to have this new life. People are saying things, you know," Marianne murmured, clearly uncomfortable. Eliza felt a pang in her heart. "What kind of things?" she asked, trying to remain calm. "Well, some people are saying that maybe you're not who you claim to be, that you might have manipulated Thomas in some way," Marianne replied quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. Eliza took a deep breath, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Marianne, I can assure you that everything Thomas did for me and my children was out of kindness. I never asked for anything but a chance to start over." Marianne nodded, looking relieved. "I believe you, Eliza. It's just that, you know, people talk." "Thank you for telling me," Eliza said, her mind spinning with concern. She knew she needed to address this before it spread further. The following days were marked by growing tension. Eliza noticed a slight drop in sales and felt that the community, which had once welcomed her warmly, now treated her with caution. Determined not to let rumors define her future, Eliza decided to confront the issue head-on. She organized a small community meeting at the bakery, inviting customers, friends, and neighbors for an open house day, where she offered free samples of her products and took the opportunity to address everyone's concerns. "I know there are rumors circulating about me and about the generosity Thomas showed my family," Eliza began, looking at the gathered group. "I want everyone here to know that I'm open to questions. I am here because of someone's kindness and a lot of hard work, and nothing else." The questions were many, some harsher than others, but Eliza answered each one with honesty and determination. Gradually, the ice began to break, and expressions of suspicion gave way to nods of understanding and support. By the end of the event, many approached to apologize for doubting her, touched by her openness and integrity. It seemed Eliza had managed to turn things in her favor, but the concern still weighed on her heart. The rumors had been a painful reminder that her position in the community was fragile. As Eliza dealt with these social challenges, a more personal threat began to emerge. In a quiet twilight, as she closed the bakery, a shadowy figure watched from a distance. It was Daniel, Eliza's ex-husband, who had just returned to town. Hearing about Eliza's new fortune and driven by his motives, he plotted how to claim a part of this life that Eliza had struggled so hard to build. Unaware of Daniel's presence, Eliza locked the bakery door, taking a deep breath, hoping that the coming days would bring peace. But as she would soon discover, the challenges were far from over. Eliza had just locked up the bakery, the sky already painted with the soft colors of dusk, when a familiar voice she hoped never to hear again called out from across the street. "Eliza!" The tone was insistent, unmistakable. Turning slowly, her heart racing, Eliza saw Daniel approaching with the arrogant stride she knew all too well. He had changed since the last time she saw him. The years had added lines of hardness to his face and a sharper look in his eyes. "Daniel," she said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly, "what are you doing here?" "Oh, Eliza, isn't it obvious?" Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in his gesture. "I heard about your new life, your fortune, as some call it. It seems you've done quite well for yourself since we parted ways." Eliza swallowed hard, crossing her arms. "I worked hard and received help that was generously offered. I don't have what you're looking for." Daniel laughed, a harsh and unpleasant sound. "Don't be so modest. I'm sure there's enough to share, especially considering everything we went through together." She looked at him, her resolve strengthening. "There's nothing here for you, Daniel. I built this life without you, and that's how it will stay." "You may think so, Eliza, but don't forget that I know all your secrets," Daniel threatened, stepping closer. "It would be a shame if everyone found out the truth about how you really got this help, wouldn't it?" Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. Daniel always knew how to manipulate situations to his advantage. "You can't threaten me like this. I won't let you." "Oh, but I can and I will," Daniel retorted, his smile turning more sinister. "Unless, of course, you decide to cooperate. Think about it, Eliza. Do you really want to risk everything you've built? Your precious children." The weight of his words hit Eliza like a punch to the gut. She knew Daniel was capable of carrying out his threats. He had shown what he was capable of in the past. Trying to maintain her composure, Eliza took a deep breath. "I'll think about your request," she said cautiously, wanting to buy time. "Good, think fast," Daniel said, turning to leave. "I'll give you until the end of the week. After that, well, you know what I'm capable of." Watching him walk away, Eliza felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The evening that had begun calmly now seemed to carry the foreboding of a storm. Heading home, Eliza barely noticed the path. Her thoughts were focused on how to protect the life she had built for herself and her children. Knowing that facing Daniel alone could be disastrous, she realized she needed help. After putting the children to bed, Eliza picked up the phone and dialed a number she had hoped never to use in such grave circumstances. It was Thomas's number. "Thomas," she said when he answered, her voice tense, "we need to talk. It's about Daniel. He's back, and I'm afraid of what he might do." There was a sigh on the other end of the line. "I'll be there in the morning, Eliza. We'll handle this together," Thomas replied, his voice conveying the calm and determination she desperately needed at that moment. Hanging up the phone, Eliza felt a mix of relief and fear. Help was on the way, but Daniel's threat still hung in the air, promising challenges she never imagined she would face again. The soft morning light had barely begun to spread over the streets of New York when Thomas arrived at Eliza's door. His face, usually calm and composed, now bore an expression of palpable concern. Eliza welcomed him in, the traces of a sleepless night evident on her face. "Thomas, thank you for coming so quickly," Eliza said, leading him to the living room where they could talk without waking the children. "Of course, Eliza. You and your children are important to me. Tell me everything that happened," Thomas replied, sitting on one of the cozy sofas in the room. Eliza recounted the encounter with Daniel, not leaving out any threat or insinuation he had made. Thomas listened intently, his jaw tightening with each detail. "This is unacceptable. We won't let him or anyone else threaten your safety," Thomas declared firmly after she finished. "I'll take immediate action." Thomas picked up his phone and dialed the number of a trusted private investigator, a professional he had worked with on delicate matters in the past. The conversation was quick and direct. "I need you to start working on a case immediately. It's an urgent situation involving a friend and her children. Yes, discreet but effective protection and surveillance. And I also need an investigation into her ex-husband." Thomas paused, looking at Eliza for her approval before continuing. She nodded, recognizing the necessity of these actions. After hanging up, Thomas turned back to Eliza. "The investigator will start today. He's very competent and will keep you and the kids safe. Additionally, he'll investigate Daniel's recent past so we can better understand what we're dealing with." Eliza felt a mix of relief and anxiety. "Thank you, Thomas. I don't know what I'd do without your help," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You'll never have to find out," Thomas replied with a slight smile, trying to reassure her. The following days brought a new routine. The detective, Mr. Hawkins, was a discreet but reassuring presence. He frequently met with Eliza to update her on the situation, always assuring her that there were no immediate signs of danger. Eliza began to feel a little safer, but the shadow of the threat still loomed. Meanwhile, the detective discovered that Daniel was involved in questionable activities, some of which could be dangerous. Delving deeper, he realized that Daniel's connections were more complex and concerning than initially thought. "Eliza, I need you to know that we're dealing with something more serious than we imagined. Daniel has complicated ties," Hawkins revealed during one of their meetings. "But I'm here, and we'll keep you safe." Hawkins's words were small comfort to Eliza, who clung to the hope that the situation would be resolved without major consequences. She knew the battle was far from over, but with Thomas and the detective by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came her way. However, the truth about Daniel's activities would only be fully revealed after a shocking discovery the detective would make, a discovery that would change the course of their actions and heighten the urgency to protect Eliza and her family even more. As Detective Hawkins delved deeper into his investigation of Daniel, the layers of his recent life began to unfold, revealing a plot far more sinister than simple threats and blackmail. In his office, filled with monitors and papers, Hawkins marked each new development with meticulous precision. One day, while Eliza continued her routine at the bakery, trying to maintain an appearance of normalcy for her children and customers, Hawkins scheduled an urgent meeting with Thomas. "Thomas, we've discovered something you need to know immediately," Hawkins began as soon as Thomas entered his office. "Daniel is involved not just in petty crimes or threats. He is part of a drug trafficking network. And he's not just a pawn, he plays a significant role in this organization." Thomas sat down abruptly, the gravity of the information hitting him like a blow. "This is very serious. How do we proceed?" Hawkins unfolded a map on the table, showing several marked locations. "These are the areas where Daniel was seen conducting suspicious activities. We're working with the local police for a possible raid. Based on the evidence we've gathered, we can get an arrest warrant by the end of the week." Thomas nodded, his mind working quickly. "Do whatever is necessary. I want to ensure Eliza and the children are safe. If Daniel is really this dangerous, we need to act fast." In the following days, Hawkins and his team, in coordination with local authorities, set up a carefully planned operation. They monitored Daniel's movements, intercepted communications, and gathered enough evidence to support legal action. Finally, on a gray morning, the operation was launched. Daniel was apprehended in one of his safe houses, surrounded by incriminating evidence that left no room for doubt about his guilt. The arrest was swift and efficient, captured by the security cameras Hawkins had installed at strategic points. When Thomas received the news of Daniel's arrest, he immediately called Eliza. "Eliza, it's Thomas. I have good news. Daniel was arrested this morning. He won't be able to harm you or the kids anymore." Eliza felt a wave of relief so strong that she had to sit down. "Oh, Thomas, I don't even know what to say. Thank you for everything you've done." "You don't need to thank me, Eliza. I promised I would protect you and your children, and that's what I'm doing," Thomas replied, his voice firm and reassuring. With Daniel in custody, Eliza hoped life could finally return to normal. But Detective Hawkins still had reservations. Although Daniel's arrest was a significant victory, the investigation had revealed connections that went beyond him. Some of Daniel's associates were still at large, and Hawkins knew the threat wasn't completely neutralized. While Eliza and Thomas celebrated the news, Hawkins continued his work, determined to dismantle the entire network Daniel was connected to. What he didn't know was that his investigations were about to lead to an even more shocking discovery, one that would change the course of events in an unforeseen way. With Daniel's arrest bringing tangible relief to Eliza's life, she could now breathe more freely, her days and nights no longer haunted by the threat of his return. Although the bakery had already been a bright spot in her life, Eliza saw in this newfound stability an opportunity not only to continue her work but also to expand it and create a legacy of help and hope for others. On a sunny morning, Eliza met with Laura, a small business consultant, at the corner table of her bakery, now adorned with colorful drawings by her children and photographs of cakes and happy events. She had ambitious plans and wanted to discuss them with someone who could guide her in transforming her small bakery into a community centerpiece. "Laura, I'm thinking about expanding the bakery," Eliza began, sharing her thoughts as she turned a page in her notebook filled with notes and sketches. "Not just as a business, but as a community space. I want it to be a place where people come not just for a slice of cake, but also for support and companionship." Laura nodded, impressed with Eliza's vision. "That sounds amazing, Eliza. And considering how your bakery has already become popular, I think you have a solid foundation for this type of expansion. Have you thought about how you'd like to structure this? Yes, I imagined offering workshops, maybe cooking classes, sessions for single parents, a place to exchange skills and support, Eliza explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. And I want to use part of the profits to start an organization to help women who have been in situations like mine. That's very admirable, Laura responded, taking notes. Let's create a detailed business plan, look at possible physical space expansions, and also ways to engage the community to support and benefit from this growth. In the following weeks, Eliza worked tirelessly, not only in the kitchen but also in meetings with Laura, architects, and community leaders. She wanted every detail to reflect her commitment to quality and the community. At the same time, she began sketching what would become the Hope Foundation, an organization dedicated to providing resources, education, and support to women and families in need. Eliza felt that each step she took was a building block toward a brighter future for people who, like her, faced seemingly insurmountable adversities. "Mommy, are you going to bake cakes with other mommies?" Lucy asked one afternoon while drawing at the kitchen table. "Yes, sweetheart, and much more," Eliza replied, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "We're going to help many people feel safe and happy, just like us." As the project took shape, Eliza organized an event to launch the foundation. The community responded with incredible enthusiasm, many offering to help or donate. It was evident that Eliza had touched many hearts beyond those who had tasted her sweets. However, as Eliza built these new beginnings, she was reminded that the past could still cast long shadows. While preparing for the grand launch event of the foundation, an unexpected call from Hawkins brought news that threatened to disrupt the peace she had worked so hard to establish. The deeper investigation revealed that Daniel's network was more extensive and rooted in the community than they had anticipated. Thomas, always a pillar of strength and stability in the lives of Eliza and many others, began to face his own set of challenges that no one could have foreseen. Lately, he felt unusually tired, initially attributing the exhaustion to work stress and concerns about Eliza's safety. However, the persistence of his symptoms led him, reluctantly, to consult his doctor. On a cloudy morning, Thomas sat in the office of Dr. Leonard, a trusted physician who had known him for years. After a series of tests and a long wait for results that seemed to drag on endlessly, Dr. Leonard called Thomas back into the office to discuss the findings. "Thomas, the results are not what we expected," Dr. Leonard began, looking seriously at the papers in front of him. "Your creatinine levels are elevated, and your glomerular filtration rate is below normal. I'm concerned you are facing significant kidney failure." Thomas, sitting rigidly in the leather chair, felt his heart sink. "What does this mean, practically speaking?" he asked, trying to maintain composure. "It means your kidney isn't functioning as it should, and the function is deteriorating rapidly. You'll need a kidney transplant as soon as possible," Dr. Leonard explained, his voice full of a mix of professional concern and personal empathy. The impact of the words hit Thomas like a sudden storm. He had always considered himself the rock on which others could lean. The idea of being the vulnerable one, the dependent one, was almost inconceivable. "Is there anything I can do while we wait for a compatible donor?" Thomas asked, already thinking about how he could resolve the situation with the same efficiency he used to handle business problems. "We'll put you on the transplant list and start dialysis to manage the symptoms," Dr. Leonard replied. "But you need to prepare for a significant lifestyle change, at least for now." Thomas left the doctor's office with more questions than answers, his mind spinning around the implications of what he had learned. In the days that followed, he began dialysis, an exhausting process that left him even more fatigued, but it was necessary to keep his condition stable. One day, as he was leaving a dialysis session, Thomas received a call from Eliza, who was planning the Hope Foundation's launch event. She immediately noticed that something was wrong in his voice. "Thomas, are you okay? You sound different." Eliza expressed her concern, always attentive. "Eliza, I didn't want to worry you with this now, With everything you already have on your plate, Thomas began, hesitant. But I'm facing some health problems. I need a kidney transplant. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Thomas could almost hear the concern growing in Eliza. Oh, Thomas, I'm so sorry to hear that. Please tell me how I can help. You've supported me so much, I want to be there for you too, Eliza replied, her voice filled with determination and care. Thank you, Eliza. Just knowing I can count on you is a great help, Thomas said, feeling a mix of gratitude and relief to have someone like Eliza in his life. As Thomas faced this new and harsh reality, he began to understand the value of time and health in a way he had never considered before. What he didn't know was that the solution to his condition would come from an unexpectedly close source, revealing the depth and reciprocity of the bonds he had formed over the years. In the days following the revelation of his condition, Thomas found himself engulfed in a sea of reflections. Dialysis, although essential, was a constant reminder of his vulnerability. Each session left him contemplative, pondering the intricate paths that life takes. Eliza, on her part, processed the news with a mix of concern and a steadfast determination to repay the kindness Thomas had shown her. She spent hours researching kidney transplants, understanding every step of the process. Before making a decision, she considered a natural step in the journey they had shared. One afternoon, after one of his visits to the dialysis clinic, Thomas received a call from Eliza. Thomas, can we talk? I have something important to discuss with you, and I'd prefer to do it in person, she said, her voice carrying an unusual seriousness. Of course, Eliza. You can come over whenever you like, Thomas replied, curious and somewhat anxious about what Eliza wanted to discuss. Later that day, sitting in the peaceful garden of Thomas's house, where the colors of autumn painted a vivid picture, Eliza took a deep breath before she began to speak. Thomas, you've done so much for me and my children. You've changed our lives. And now, I'd like to offer something in return, something I hope can change your life too. Thomas looked at Eliza, noticing the intensity in her eyes. What do you mean, Eliza? I've had some tests done, Eliza continued, her voice steady, and the results showed that I'm a match. I want to donate one of my kidneys to you, Thomas. Thomas was momentarily speechless, surprised and moved by the offer. Eliza, this is a huge decision. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Eliza replied, holding Thomas's hands. You gave me a new life, and now I have the chance to help save yours. It's more than gratitude. It's an acknowledgement of everything we've been through. I want to do this. Thomas looked at the gardens, where the leaves danced gently in the wind, reflecting on the generosity and sacrifice Eliza was willing to make. After a long moment, he squeezed her hands in response. I don't know what to say, except, thank you, Eliza. Your generosity touches me deeply. Let's talk to the doctors and see what needs to be done. In the days that followed, Eliza and Thomas consulted with transplant specialists, who guided them through the next steps. It was a complex process, but Eliza's determination and Thomas's support made each stage more bearable. As they prepared for the procedure, Eliza felt an inner peace, knowing she was doing something profoundly meaningful not just for Thomas, but also as an example for her children, demonstrating the power of gratitude and kindness. After the successful transplant, as they recovered together, a new depth of connection formed between them. A bond strengthened not only by mutual help but also by sharing something as essential as life itself. And it was during this recovery that Eliza decided to expand her foundation even further, inspired by the journey they had taken together, ready to help others find hope and renewal in their own lives. The hospital, with its long, silent corridors, was filled with tension and hope as Eliza and Thomas prepared for the transplant. The medical team worked with surgical precision, and after hours in the operating room, the procedure was declared a success. Eliza's kidney had found a new home in Thomas's body, promising a new chance at life. In the days that followed, as both recovered in the hospital, their rooms became centers of reflection and renewal. Thomas, still weak but visibly improving each day, often met Eliza in a small lounge reserved for patients and their families, where they could talk away from curious eyes and medical routines. During one of these afternoons, with the sun setting and casting a golden glow through the window, Thomas looked at Eliza with deep admiration and gratitude. "Eliza, I can't express how much this means to me. Not just the transplant, but all the support. Your decision saved my life." Eliza, holding a cup of tea, smiled softly. "Thomas, I did what I felt was right. And, in a way, it's given me a completely new perspective on what truly matters." Thomas nodded, looking at their intertwined hands. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately," he began, his voice a bit stronger than in previous days. "About how the actions we take affect others, and how we can truly make a difference. You've done that for me, and I want to continue doing that for others." "That's something that really resonates with me," Eliza replied. "The foundation, the bakery, it all started because someone decided to invest in me when I needed it most. I hope that through our foundation, we can continue this cycle of kindness." Their conversations often turned to future plans, to ways to expand the Hope Foundation and make it a beacon for those in vulnerable situations. Thomas was particularly interested in establishing scholarships and mentoring programs for at-risk youth. "Imagine, Eliza, if we can prepare the next generation to face challenges with courage and generosity. To teach them not just to survive but to thrive and help others," Thomas pondered, visibly excited by the idea. Eliza agreed, the enthusiasm in her voice equally palpable. "And with each person we help, each life we touch, we expand this legacy of gratitude and service. It's like throwing stones into a lake. The waves ripple far beyond the initial point." As they planned, both knew that the journey would be long and sometimes challenging. But there was a strength in sharing their visions and dreams that made them more resolute. At the end of one of these afternoons, when the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, Eliza looked at Thomas with a silent promise of continued commitment. "We're going to do this, Thomas. We're going to make a difference." And he, with a smile that was both of gratitude and determination, simply replied, "Together." The physical recovery of both continued to progress, and with each passing day, they grew stronger not only physically but in their shared purpose. However, the success of the surgery and their aspirations for the future were about to be tested, as the shadow of the past still loomed over them, bringing new challenges that would require even more courage and resilience. As Eliza and Thomas continued to recover, their conversations frequently revolved around the positive impacts of their joint actions. On one of these afternoons, while sharing a quiet moment in the hospital recovery area with the soft late afternoon light streaming through the window, Eliza decided to share deeper details about the progress of the Hope Foundation. "Thomas, you know how important the foundation has been to me, and you've been an essential part of it from the start," Eliza began, her voice filled with emotion and gratitude. "I wanted you to know more about what we've accomplished together." Thomas, who had been reading a book, set it aside, giving Eliza his full attention. "I've always believed in your vision, Eliza. Tell me everything." Eliza smiled, picking up a folder filled with reports and photos. "Well, since we started the foundation, we've established several programs that are truly making a difference. For example, our scholarship program for women who want to return to school or start a new career has already helped more than 50 women." Thomas nodded, clearly impressed. "That's amazing, Eliza. And how are these women doing?" "They're thriving. Many have already completed their courses and found better jobs. And it's not just that," Eliza continued, flipping through the folder to find some letters. "We receive constant feedback. Here, look at some of the letters they've sent us." Thomas took the letters, reading some aloud. One of them said, "Without the help of the Hope Foundation, I would never have been able to move forward. Now, not only am I working in a job I love, but I can also better care for my family. Thank you for believing in me." After finishing reading, Thomas looked at Eliza, his eyes shining with a mix of emotion and pride. "You did this, Eliza. You turned your own struggles into a force to help others." Eliza nodded, feeling a mix of humility and determination. "We did this, Thomas. Without your initial support, none of this would be possible. It makes me think about the future, Eliza. What else can we do? How can we further expand the foundation's reach?" Thomas asked, already thinking about the next steps. "I've been thinking about that too. Maybe we can start including programs for at-risk youth, offering mentorship and educational support," Eliza suggested. "That sounds perfect. Let's do it. Let's make sure our legacy continues to grow, helping not only current generations but also future ones," Thomas said, his voice firm with resolve. They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing new ideas and planning how they could implement them, each plan intertwined with the promise of more kindness and positive transformations. It was clear that together they were building something lasting, something that would leave positive marks for many years to come. As the day gave way to night, Eliza and Thomas shared a sense of contentment and purpose. But despite the optimistic plans and abundant goodwill, they were about to face new challenges that would test the strength of their newly established foundation and the convictions that sustained it. As the afternoon unfolded, Thomas and Eliza continued their discussions about the future of the Hope Foundation in the comfort of the hospital's small garden, where the gentle breeze helped ease the weight of the important decisions they were making. The conversation gradually shifted from projects and plans for the future to something much more personal and significant. Thomas, watching two children playing in the distance, his gaze fixed and thoughtful, turned to Eliza with an expression of determination mixed with a softness she rarely saw. "Eliza, over the years, you and your children have become more than just friends to me," he began, choosing his words carefully. "You've become family." Eliza, surprised by the change in tone, leaned forward, paying attention. "And I've been thinking," Thomas continued, "about how we can strengthen this bond, not just emotionally, but in a more formal way. I'd like to propose something, if you'll allow me." Curious and a bit anxious, Eliza nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I'd like to legally adopt Matt and Lucy as my grandchildren," Thomas said, his gaze steady, gauging Eliza's reaction. The proposal left Eliza momentarily breathless. She always knew how much Thomas cared for her and her children, but this offer was something she never imagined possible. "Thomas, this is a big thing. Are you sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything," Thomas replied with warm conviction. "Since the transplant, my perspective on life has changed. I want to ensure Matt and Lucy have every opportunity possible in the future, and I want to be legally secured in their lives." Eliza felt tears forming in her eyes, touched by the generosity and seriousness of the gesture. "They already love you as a grandfather," she said, her voice trembling. "And I can't think of anything more wonderful than making this official." The two discussed what this change would mean, not just for them but for the children. Thomas insisted that they involve Matt and Lucy in the process, wanting to ensure their voices were heard and respected. In the following days, Thomas and Eliza spoke with the children, explaining what the adoption would mean and asking how they felt about it. Matt, always the more thoughtful one, expressed his approval with a tight hug for Thomas, while Lucy, with her usual joy, jumped with excitement. "Are you going to be our real grandpa?" Lucy asked, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "If you want me to be," Thomas replied, his own eyes no less moist. "Yes, I do," she exclaimed, running to hug him again. With everyone's consent, they began the legal adoption process, marking a new chapter in their lives. And as this new family began to officially take shape, Eliza and Thomas knew the journey ahead would still bring many challenges. However, they would face everything together, strengthened not only by the legal bond but by the love and dedication they shared. It was a moment of celebration, but the shadows of the past and future challenges were not far away, and they knew that the test of their new foundation and newly formed family ties would soon come. After formalizing their new family bond, Eliza and Thomas sat on the porch of Thomas's house, overlooking the garden where Matt and Lucy played. The air was fresh, and the mild afternoon offered the perfect setting for a serious discussion about the future of the Hope Foundation. "Eliza, Thomas began, watching the children with a tender smile. "Now that we're starting this new chapter as a family, I think it's the perfect time to think about how we can take the foundation to new heights." Eliza nodded, feeling the weight and excitement of the responsibility. "I've been thinking about that too. The foundation has already done so much, but there's so much more we can do." "Exactly," said Thomas, pulling out a notepad and pencil. "I'd like to explore new areas where the foundation can make a difference. Maybe focus more on education, offering scholarships and mentoring programs for young people from challenging backgrounds." Eliza reflected for a moment, inspired by the idea. "That would be amazing. And how about considering mental health? Many of the women we help face significant emotional challenges. We could offer workshops and counseling." "An excellent idea," replied Thomas, writing quickly. "Mental health is fundamental, and there's a great need for support in that area." As they talked, Eliza pulled out her tablet and began sketching a preliminary plan. "We can create partnerships with psychologists and therapists who are willing to work with us. Maybe even establish a training program so we can have a team dedicated to mental health within the foundation." Thomas looked at Eliza, impressed by her vision and initiative. "You're thinking of everything, Eliza. We're going to need additional funding for this. Maybe it's time to seek new donors or even consider a fundraising campaign." "A fundraising campaign is a great idea," agreed Eliza. "We could organize an event, maybe a dinner or a benefit concert. It could be a way not only to raise funds but also to increase awareness of the foundation's work." "Let's do it," said Thomas, excited. "I know some people in the arts and entertainment world who could help us organize something memorable." As the afternoon turned to evening, they continued to work out the details, each idea bringing more clarity and enthusiasm to their plans. With a renewed sense of purpose, they were ready to transform the Hope Foundation into something even greater, a true empire of hope that could reach and transform countless lives. Satisfied with the progress, they finally decided to take a break, promising to resume the discussion the next morning. As they got up to call the children inside, both knew that although the work ahead would be challenging, they had the vision, the commitment, and most importantly, each other to make it all happen. In the serenity of twilight, as the last lights of the day bid farewell to the horizon, Thomas found himself in his library, a place where he always liked to retreat to think. Surrounded by shelves filled with books that told stories of great deeds and deep philosophical reflections, he sat in his favorite armchair, a glass of red wine in hand, contemplating the journey of his life. The silence of the environment was perfect for introspection. Thomas thought about everything he had accomplished, his successes in business, his influence in the technology world, and his ability to change lives, including those of Eliza and her children. However, more recently, his reflections had taken a different turn, influenced by Eliza's courage and generosity. "The true value of success," Thomas murmured to himself, pondering the measures by which he evaluated his own life. "It's not just what we accumulate, but what we give, what we leave behind." The room was enveloped in a soft light, the shadows of the shelves creating complex patterns on the carpet. Thomas stood up and walked to the window, looking out where the stars began to appear in the night sky. He thought about how Eliza had used the second chance he had given her not only to transform her own life, but also to impact the lives of others. "Eliza showed me that a legacy isn't built through what we build alone, but by what we help others build," he reflected, feeling a deep gratitude for having found someone who redefined his perspective on the world. His mind turned to future plans for the Hope Foundation and how they could continue to expand its impact. "I want my legacy to be more than business and innovations. I want it to be about humanity, about making a real difference in people's lives," he thought. Taking a final sip of his wine, Thomas decided it was time to document these reflections. He sat at his antique desk, opened his journal, and began to write, not only to record his thoughts but as a way to share these ideas with Eliza and perhaps, one day, with Matt and Lucy. "My dear children," he wrote, "I hope that one day, when you read this, you can understand why I made the choices I did and how every step I took was meant to build something lasting, something good. As he wrote, Thomas felt a deep peace settling in his heart. He knew that, regardless of what the future held, he had made choices that aligned success and meaning in a way he had never imagined before. As he finished writing his reflections, the doorbell rang. It was Eliza, arriving for another planning meeting. Together, they had many challenges ahead, but Thomas was ready, knowing that each challenge was an opportunity to further strengthen his true legacy. They prepared to discuss the foundation's future once again, but an unexpected event would soon capture their attention, challenging them to put into practice all the reflections and decisions Thomas had contemplated that night. The evening was falling gently as Eliza and Thomas prepared for another meeting about the next steps for the Hope Foundation. However, instead of the usual work environment, they were interrupted by an unexpected notification that appeared on Eliza's computer. It was an email from an international philanthropy organization known for its rigorous selection process to recognize and support the most impactful initiatives worldwide. "Thomas, look at this," Eliza called out, her voice a mix of disbelief and excitement. She turned the laptop so Thomas could see. "It's from the Global Philanthropy Awards." Thomas, adjusting his glasses, leaned in to read the email. As he read, a smile formed on his face. "This is extraordinary, Eliza." The email began with formalities but quickly got to the point. "It is with great pleasure that we inform you that the Hope Foundation has been selected as one of this year's recipients of the Global Philanthropy Award. Your exemplary commitment to education and mental health in underserved communities has captured the attention of our committee." Eliza covered her mouth with her hand, emotional. "Thomas, do you realize what this means?" "Yes, it's recognition of the incredible work you started and that we've expanded together. More than that, it's a vote of confidence that will bring more resources and more opportunities for us to grow even further." The conversation turned into a mix of celebration and strategic planning. They discussed how the award would bring international visibility to the foundation and how they should seize this moment to attract more support, expand their existing programs, and start new projects. "We should think about a press conference," Eliza suggested, already considering ways to maximize the impact of the news. "And maybe a series of public workshops to really put the foundation on the global map." "Absolutely," agreed Thomas. "And we need to make sure our team is ready for the increased interest that's coming. We'll need more hands, more minds." As the night progressed, they sketched out an action plan, outlining each step with care and precision. The foundation, which began as Eliza's dream to change a few lives, was preparing to become a beacon of hope on a global scale. Eliza's phone rang, briefly interrupting her thoughts. It was a call from one of the foundation's major donors, who had also received the news. "Eliza, I just saw. Congratulations. We are so proud to support the Hope Foundation. Let's discuss how we can increase our contribution this year." With a heart full of gratitude and a mind buzzing with plans, Eliza thanked the donor, promising to get in touch soon to discuss details. She hung up the phone, looked at Thomas, and they shared a moment of joyful quietude. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" said Thomas, reflecting on the journey so far. "Yes, just the beginning," Eliza agreed, feeling inspired and ready for the challenges and opportunities she knew would come. As news of the Hope Foundation's international recognition spread, the local community and the growing network of supporters began to gather to celebrate the triumphs achieved. The atmosphere was one of festivity and reflection, a combination of joy for the success and deep contemplation about the steps that had led them there. Eliza and Thomas, along with Matt and Lucy, organized a large community event. They decided that the celebration would take place in the gardens of Thomas's house, transforming the space into a festive gathering place, filled with colorful lights and tables decorated with seasonal flowers. The entire community was invited, as well as members of the foundation, donors, and volunteers. "Look at all this, Thomas," Eliza said as she watched the final preparations, a radiant smile lighting up her face. "It feels like a dream, doesn't it?" Thomas, standing beside her, holding her hand, nodded. "More than a dream, Eliza. It's the realization of many dreams, a testament to what kindness and determination can achieve together. As guests began to arrive, soft music filled the air, and lively laughter and conversations echoed through the garden. Children ran across the lawn, their laughter mingling with the sounds of celebration. Thomas, looking around, felt every moment deeply, savoring the human connection the foundation had fostered. During the event, Eliza took to the small stage set up for the occasion and, with a microphone in hand, called everyone's attention. "I want to thank each of you for being here today and for all the support you've given us," she began, her voice firm and clear. "Each of you has contributed to this legacy of kindness we are building. Together, we are making a difference, transforming lives, and cultivating a future where love and support are accessible to all." After Eliza's speech, Thomas also had a few words to say. He stood up, walked to the stage with steady steps, and looked at the crowd with gratitude. "When I met Eliza and her wonderful children, I didn't know my life would change so much. They taught me the true meaning of family and legacy. The true measure of success is not how much we accumulate for ourselves, but how much we can give back to the world." The celebration continued until dusk, with people sharing stories of how the Hope Foundation had helped or inspired them. It was evident that the Foundation's impact went far beyond immediate programs. It was creating ripples of change that would resonate for many generations. As night fell and the stars began to appear, Thomas and Eliza walked together through the gardens, hand in hand, reflecting on the journey. "You were right, Eliza," Thomas murmured. "It's just the beginning." And as the party dwindled and the last guests said their goodbyes, both knew that every effort and every challenge had been worth it. The legacy they were building was not just of projects and programs, but of hearts touched and lives transformed, a true empire of hope and love. With the moon shining above them, Thomas and Eliza knew that, regardless of what the future held, they had created something enduring, something that would continue to grow and flourish, driven by the tireless human spirit of compassion and generosity.
So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support and see you in the next videos.